21 Park Board meeting. This evening we have 3 items on regular business for the agenda. We're going to have another update on Hillside Park, another update on Blackberry Park, and an update on wayfinding. So, pardon me, before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and do roll call. And so when I call your name, please take yourself off mute and say that you are here. Ruben? Ruben? That darn mute button.
There we go.
There we go. Thanks, Ruben. Jonathan?
Here.
Linda? Coming, Linda. There you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Danielle.
I'm here.
April.
Here.
If anybody else showed up. See anybody? Okay, thank you, everyone. I assume that you had an opportunity to review minutes from our last meeting in February. Any comments or concerns? Does anyone have objections to approving minutes from our last meeting? Seeing no objections, I hereby approve minutes. Thank you for that. So we're now on to public comments this evening. I understand we do have at least one person that would like to speak tonight. So I will go ahead and, is it Mary, I believe? And this, do you need to unmute her, Melissa, or can she do that herself?
Can we confirm the caller that just dialed in ending at 85 is Mary?
It is Mary, and I can't get on, I'm sorry, I can't get on the WebEx meeting. 3 of us have tried to get on it, and I don't know where we missed out. I tried Issaquah boards and commissions, and I tried ICTV 21. I can't get on.
That's fine, Mary. We can hear you. So if that's fine with you,
Okay.
Please go ahead and make your comment.
Sure, that's fine. I've lived in Issaquah for quite a while, and I've loved living here, and I've always felt good about local government. But I have some real problems with the whole thing of the park issue, Hillside Park. First of all, my husband and I went to the meeting in 2014. I'm not saying that there wasn't more than one meeting, but at the one that we went to, everyone who spoke was in favor of leaving the park as it was. So there was no reason for me to think that there was anything else that was going to happen. In February, I saw out my window a surveyor, and I had no idea what was going on there. And then I saw tagged trees, so I called in to the city, and I was directed to a person who would help me and find out about that. They said a meeting was planned, but I had no way of knowing when that meeting was. That person told me that it was on the city website, but I don't regularly go to the city website, and I wouldn't have anyway thought that there was something that 7 years ago, I thought was a dead issue. So there's nothing that I would have, gone there for to find out information. And then they said they'd put out a notice. They did, but that meeting started with, how do we want to play? So I think it seemed obvious that the decision had already been made. It didn't say, do you want this park? Do you want this playground, or do you not want this playground? It didn't give anybody the option to do that or anything until the very end of the meeting. And by that time, they'd asked people to vote on which was better. I guess what I feel is that if the city wanted input, if they want input, then they should do things like it's an input situation. Instead of having having their minds made up ahead of time and then just asking for, something small like, which playground set do you like the best? And let's see, what else was I going to say? Just that the survey was the same way. It started out with, these are the different kinds of playground equipment. At the very end, you had a chance to say, I really don't care to have a playground in the park. And so I really feel that it wasn't something where the city wanted input. I feel like they'd made up their mind. And that just didn't feel too good. I know somebody who lives 2 houses from the park, and they didn't even know any of this was going on. The city used to send out postcards to people who were in the surrounding area about things that would come up. One that comes to mind is the water tower when that was being done, some street work and stuff. I wish people would get a chance to have that information beforehand and really give some input if the city really wants to hear what its citizens have to say. So again, I've loved living in Issaquah. I've been here for a number of years, but I really feel like there was no chance for anyone to say anything previous to this. It was totally sprung on people, is the way that I feel at this point.
Is that it, Mary?
Yes.
Thank you for your comment this evening.
Okay.
And Brad, we also have Ryan Fleischer. Ryan, did you still want to speak as well? You're
Can you hear
unmuted.
me?
Yep.
So like Mary, I've lived in Issaquah. I've lived here over 40 years. I live on Squawk, fairly close to the park. I don't know if the city comes out very much, but the park is actually used quite frequently by a lot of people. There's kids playing there, people walking their dogs through there, people just walking and enjoying nature. I just have grave concern about adding a playground to that park when there's no parking. So you're going to create an attractant, but no place to park. So then you're going to be people are going to be parking in neighbors' yards, and people who didn't intend for their front yard to be a parking lot, or they're going to be parking at the upper cemetery, which already has some people parking there. And I don't think anybody who would go to Upper Cemetery for any reason would want to be involved with people walking through to go to a park. That's a serene place and a place of remembrance, not a place of walk-through traffic. I just think there should be some place that's just nature. The rest of the nature spaces are either trails or hiking, and this is a nice open space where kids can go kick a ball, kids can run around, and I just don't see a need to dig some huge thing, or even not dig, but to put in a play structure is a very major construction project. It's also not very accessible. If someone were to get hurt, there's no ambulance access because there's no parking lot. So I just think it's kind of asking for disaster, and I think it's creating an attractant where there isn't a place for those people to go. It's a walk-in park. So I think, like Mary, I feel like the people who could walk into that park should have been given a little bit more priority on the survey since we live here. Because the survey said, do you live here? Do you live out of the area? Well, I kind of don't see what it matters with someone out of the area if we're not building it for them. So I just have concern. I also feel like we're coming out of COVID and finances are tight. We keep hearing about budget cuts and we can't fix this because the budget. We can't fix this because the budget. So why are we spending a huge amount of money on a park? And once you put it there and once you cut down the trees and once you dig in the ground, that's something you can't undo. We can't ever go back. So if we build a huge playground and 2 kids play on it and a whole huge number of people are upset about it, we can't undo that. That can't ever be undone. Those beautiful 80-foot trees can't be replanted. So I just think it's not the best thing, and I think there should be spaces that are just nature, and that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you this evening for your comment. It will be considered.
And there's one other caller on the line. I don't know if they wanted to make comments, so I will unmute you, Sam, so you can indicate yes or no.
Okay, yes, thank you. My wife and I, we've lived here for 35 years and are just a couple blocks from the park. And I certainly second Mary's comment about the the notice on this situation. I think ever since we've lost the Issaquah Press, it's been very difficult at times to find out what's going on in the town. So yes, I think there's a very real notice issue. I also agree with the second caller. I didn't quite catch her name, and Mary as well, that the meeting, I was at the meeting, I believe this last month, there was a meeting, there were about 30 or 40 people, and a lot of it seems to be pretty much a done deal. Like you've already got an engineering firm that's done their surveying. They have cited things. There's all these options seem to be laid out already, and it was merely a fact of trying to pick which was going to be the least disruptive to satisfy the city's apparent desire, because the people from the park board, there were a couple of people there, sounded like they really wanted to keep this a neighborhood park, which I think is the overwhelming sentiment. We don't want a destination park here. But it seems like with all the work that's gone on, it's already been pretty much decided that certain things will happen. So again, the question of keeping people informed and involved seems to have kind of taken a back seat to things. So I am concerned about the process, and concerned that something's already kind of been decided, and we're just hoping for the least damaging result.
Thank you for your comment, Sam. Any other public comments?
There are no other callers on the line. You just had the two inquiries or comments that came in through email that will attach to the minutes.
Okay. Jeff, I don't know if you want to make a comment right now, or if you'd rather just wait to your rollout here under regular business.
Yeah, no, really appreciate that public comment, and we can just roll it into our progress report and discussion with you all later on.
Okay. Well, as it turns out, that later on has arrived. And so we're already on regular business. And as it turns out, Hillside Park is the first item on the agenda to discuss. So Jeff and Jennifer, I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, for that. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, as Jen is pulling up her screen to share the PowerPoint, is it showing?
Not yet. Hold on.
Okay.
Hang on.
Well, as Jen is doing that, thanks, Jen. I'll get started. Jeff Watling, Parks and Community Services Director with the City of Issaquah. Yeah, wanted to come back and give a progress report on how those first meetings went in regards to the two park projects that were placed on our approved budget from council this year. As I had a chance to discuss and provide a sneak peek of that presentation at our February 22nd meeting. You may recall in the 2021 budget, this year's budget, City Council authorized some capital funding to add play amenities to Hillside Park and to replace the play structure at Blackberry Park. In regards to Hillside Park, this was related to the 2014 series of public conversations that did occur. Knowing that there was a desire at that time, not by everybody, but certainly a desire at that time to find ways to incorporate, thanks Jen, that looks great, to incorporate play amenities into Hillside Park. Following the presentation and discussion we had about how we were going to approach this project in this process last meeting, February 22nd, later that week, we did have our first meeting, virtual meeting in regards to Hillside Park on the 24th, and then on the 25th had a subsequent meeting in regards to Blackberry. Jen, why don't you go next slide, and we'll talk Hillside first. The intent tonight is to really, I think, share with all of you what we heard and what we learned. And in some ways, starting with Hillside Park, what's confirmed really from the 2014 conversation as we go back and look at those minutes and the commentary there, as we heard both in written form and in verbal form during the virtual meeting with 40 plus attendees, and then what we saw in the online survey. There is some strong emotion around Hillside Park in terms of desire for keeping it as is, concern about how to incorporate play, a desire and interest to have additional play by many residents up there, but also really strong opinion not to do anything by other residents. And so I think what's important, and one of the general takeaways I want to give in this introduction, as Jennifer talks a little bit further about the survey, is that this project's going to need more time. And it's something I've had a chance to share with the mayor and city administrator already. We want to have more conversation with the community. We want to allow time to discuss more and understand that incorporating play into this park, to meeting some of the needs of residents up there, to have play closer to their homes, much like other communities have in Issaquah, to still treat this as a walk-in park. This is not a project that we can just approach with, I guess, an old school approach of just plopping a piece of play equipment into a park. And I think we shared this with you all in February, certainly shared it at the virtual meetings, shared it as we introduced the design consultant, Mithun. We do think it's really important to have a design team on hand right now. Not that we know exactly what we're going to do, but when we have public discussions about play and what does play look like in the unique park spaces that we have, it's important that we tread into those in an informed way and in a careful way. And so what you're going to hear tonight with these updates is really from the two meetings, we've heard two very different things. At Hillside, we heard, as I said earlier, a need for further discussion, a need to talk through the differences and understand the competing interests that exist with that park. And allow the time needed for that project. Whereas Blackberry, we heard a lot of consensus, and it's probably a project that you'll see tonight as we think through timelines. Will be a timeline that will be a little quicker in that work. If you want to go to next slide, Jen, I can sort of tee up some of these talking points and then turn it over to you. So. Really, we want to talk a little bit further and share with you what we heard and what we learned, both at the public meeting and from the survey responses. We also want to touch base on site analysis. We've heard both in 2014 as well as at the public meeting, as well as the conversation we had with all of you in February, an interest to addressing the play lawn and some drainage issues that have existed with that field, and really understanding that field itself is play. And how do we improve that play space? There's some site analysis we need to do to further diagnose what's going on with that drainage issue and drainage problem before we can create drainage solutions. So I want to talk a little bit further about that, and then talk through next steps and really this desire, as I said earlier, to add some additional work, to add some additional conversation, to hosting another public meeting to just talk through what we heard, as well as have a chance to have an on-site open house and begin to talk through some of these issues, to understand and outline the difference between some of the common ground interests we heard, as well as the competing interests that we heard, and really, as our job as staff, trying to serve a public that has very different opinions on what they'd like to see Hillside do. It's not our job to try and determine who wins and loses, but see if we can seek balanced solutions to incorporating play and play elements into this park that still preserve, protect, keep the essence, the quiet walk-in nature of this park. So with that, Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit further about what we heard and what we learned, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So as Jeff mentioned, back on the February 24th public meeting, we did hear a wide range of responses from the public, people who were concerned about a play area going in, but we also heard some other voices where people are excited about having some different opportunities for play at this park. One thing is for sure, regardless whether it was at the public meeting that we had or on the online survey results, you can tell that people really care about this park, and it's a very special park to the community. And so just want to really reinforce that we recognize the value that this space holds for many people, and we are going to do what we can to ensure that that is kept, whether or not there's a playground there or not, and enhanced in some way, is to keep that park special. So I'll jump into the online survey results because we had the most feedback from that event. We had 221 responses, which is one of our largest survey responses yet. 85% of respondents lived on Squaw Mountain neighborhood. When they were asked how they would like to play, some of the top responses were they didn't want to do any play, but there was also a large contingency that wanted to do some climbing, swinging, some adventure play, and also some quiet play, which is somewhat in keeping with the park's current setting. When asked what type of playground would fit in the neighborhood, I don't like the options was one of the responses, as well as medium to large log structures made of natural materials received the most feedback. When asked about the importance of inclusive play for all children, 40% of respondents felt it was not important, while the other 60% of respondents, 25% felt it was very important. The importance of including formal fitness or play features for the entire family were not generally important. When asked to rate the importance of exploration and discovery spaces, 43% felt it wasn't important, while the remaining 50% were spread out over the importance of that rating. When asked about integrating plantings into the area, 37% felt it wasn't important, while 63% were spread out again amongst the level of importance. When asked about site amenities to accompany play, picnic benches, path seatings, and I don't like any of these options received the highest percentages. When asked about art, the response was, I don't like any of the options. But then some of the other responses were that they were encouraged by nature-inspired art, tree structures, or things that would fit and be inspired by nature, also received interest. When asked on play area location, 39% of respondents said no playground, and 61% felt otherwise, with 33.5% liking the Clearing Edge site, 14.7% the Forest Plateau site, and 12.4% the Mount McKinley entrance. When asked about play area layout, 44% of respondents stated they didn't want change to the park, while the other 55% were split, with 23% wanting one play structure or smaller play areas, 19% wanting one large area with multiple places, and 12% a series of small little areas along the trail. And that is a brief summary of the online survey results.
Jennifer, where are we going to see this in writing? Is that going to get posted so that we can kind of digest some of that material?
It already is.
It is posted on the web page already, the survey results.
So attached to the agenda, both for you as park board members as well as anyone who received it or can see it online, there's a link to the web page for this project that includes online survey results, the written feedback we got from the virtual meeting, as well as a recording of the actual recording of the virtual meeting as well.
What was our outreach? Like, how would people have been known about the survey?
The survey was posted on our social media. I emailed all of the contacts that we have had from 2014, as well as other people that I have added to the list over the years, as well as all of our social media and city e-blasts links.
So do we not, I mean, I think there was a time when the city used to do mailings or like postcards to people who lived within a certain distance of a park that would be, or project that would be improved. Do we not do that as a matter of course anymore?
Typically not, but there are certain circumstances like rezonings that do get sent out to neighborhoods. Also, I do want to say that this neighborhood they do have neighborhood contacts through the Mayor's Neighborhood Outreach Program, and so those were also notified to help spread the word within the community. And as I said, we received one of the highest survey responses we've ever received.
I would suggest that we consider that as an outreach, just because for neighborhood parks in particular, it's because it's really best to get, as you know, for everybody who is going to have an opinion to know that.
Absolutely, and I think we would echo that, Danielle. And I think an important thing to mention is this is the beginning of a conversation. This is not the end of a conversation, right? This is not the end of a project or somehow something that's going to be done now. This is really, I think, that virtual meeting, this progress report tonight. I think the need to host additional public meetings and have conversations is really the beginning of this discussion. How do we, again, seek to understand and identify what is, there is some common ground that we heard within all of this, 200 plus comments. This park is special. The trees are special. The reason we're surveying trees is not to take them down. We're surveying trees to, as we look at options and consider options, how do we protect them, preserve them, keep them, understand where they are. So, as we start this dialogue, a lot more conversation to have. I think a lot more need for us to continue to be intentional about how we're communicating when those next meetings are, where those next meetings are, as we're coming out of the pandemic and have opportunities to host some conversations on site. We want to do that as well. Again, to be reaching out to those that are immediate neighbors to the park, as well as that entire neighborhood that really sees this as their neighborhood park.
Is this an appropriate time to ask a couple more questions, or should I hold those?
Let me make just a comment here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. I mean, one of the comments this evening was that, or concerns, I think, is the introduction of a consultant. And I guess I'd like to just clarify to everyone that the consultant is not on board based upon we're moving forward with something, as much as creating some options available so that the community can factor that into what they want. And now is a good time for that consultant to participate. Because a consultant is participating, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're moving forward with the playground. Is that correct, Jeff?
Correct. This is a landscape architect firm that's going to help us begin to really explore what does it look like to incorporate and address some of what we heard in 2014 into Hillside Park. So you're right. It's we're very much at a conceptual development level, not a design construction level. And that consultant firm is helping us in this very important initial phase of considering this work.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Danielle,
Yeah,
go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, Danielle, I think if you have some additional questions about the survey, great. Maybe we can touch base, if it's not specific to that, maybe we can touch base, Jennifer and I, real quick on some of the site analysis work and next steps, and then open up for discussion. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
I can wait. I didn't know if we were going to move on to the next park, but if there's more to talk about, I can wait.
okay, a little bit more with Hillside, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So in regards to site analysis, I can speak to that again. I highlighted it a little bit before turning it over to Jennifer. And as some of the public mentioned, we've begun doing some site work, and not site work, construction, but site analysis, and really making sure we best understand the canvas that is this park and the environmental conditions that exist in this park. As we're, again, exploring this interest in adding play to the park, we want to understand what critical areas exist in that park. And those critical areas include trees. Those critical areas include steep slopes. Where are those? I think we're all aware enough of Hillside Park. Things can get pretty hilly pretty quick in terms of topography within that space and within that park. And then the other item I touched on briefly, but I think is a really important element of this project is the field drainage, something that was mentioned by the public continually from 2014, and then again just last month. So we are working with our consultant and doing some additional diagnostic work to understand what's going on with water in that area, so that we are informed and know what's happening, and then can begin to shape and consider what our options are moving forward. So that too is going to be really important work to make sure we learn not only about what the community wants, but we also learn about the site itself, and do all that work before we even consider options. In terms of next steps, as mentioned earlier, we really see the next meeting being a meeting where we check back in with the community. We have the opportunity to go through the survey results and really share what we heard and what we heard from them, and really ask that question: what have we missed? Is there anything else that we need to hear and understand? We want to do this both virtually in another virtual meeting, but we also probably within that same week host an on-site open house, if you will, where we would staff and team would be on site for a good chunk of time, 3 or 4 hours, and invite the public to come and discuss, talk, share with us their hopes, dreams, fears, and talk through the site, walk through the site. From there, and from that work, we would really then begin to outline and understand and begin to talk through what play needs exist, not only for the field, but if play is to be incorporated into the site, how could it be done in a way that meets the interests of the constituency that wants play in this site, but also might be able to be done in a way that respects and understands there is a constituency in the neighborhood that wants to keep the park as it is. And so we see a series of conversations and a series of meetings really taking place throughout this spring and summer. The initial goal that council had of completing additional play or completing this project this year in 2021, we do not see as realistic. Again, understanding we're starting these conversations. We're continuing the conversations that we had from 2014, but we still have really a lot of work to do to see how balance might be achieved. So reality of this project is that we're looking at if there is any type of installation or a project, it would likely be in 2022. So with that, Jennifer Jennifer, if you have anything else to add, or we're available for questions or your discussion.
I think just, thank you, Jeff. Just real quick, a couple of additions to address some of the public comment received is we are not looking at trying to take down any trees and change the character of the park as part of this. One of the site areas that we did explore as a potential, should play be introduced, we may have to address some trees because they are in poor health. But it is not our goal to go in there and change the character at all by taking care of removing any trees as part of this project. Also, parking, we are not looking at adding any additional parking as part of this project scope. We don't have the budget, as Jeff mentioned. This project was funded through City Council with the emphasis of what would it look to introduce play into Hillside Park. As is. And so I think it's just to reiterate, as we look through our site analysis, all of those things are also playing into the overall design of this site. So I just wanted to reemphasize those points.
Looks like it's question time, Danielle.
Okay, cool. I have a few. I think I've been on this park board for probably 15 years, I think. And this park has come up. It kind of percolates every few years to talk about. And I feel like we always kind of get to this point where there's really strong, it's really strong community sentiment to keep the park as is. Yet some people are also in the neighborhood wanting to add improvement. So it's like, it's one that's, it presents a conflict for me. But since this park is a walk-in park and we're not going to be adding parking, I think we need to be very considerate about how we're weighing public comment and placing a greater emphasis on the community that can actually walk into this park. So I wish that our survey had asked if respondents had lived within walking distance to the park. Like, that's, I think, a really relevant question to me, because if someone doesn't live within walking distance, then that means that they need to drive and there's not parking. So, to me, we need to be looking at the universe of people who can walk there. And then I would also, if I were to do another survey, I would want to know, kind of how far are people walking to get to that park and what age kids they have. Because if you're walking to a park, you might have, you can do that with you can walk kind of far if you're a mom or dad and you're pushing a kid in a stroller. So you're got your toddlers, right? You can go pretty far. But if you have a kid who's not in a stroller, you're not going to walk necessarily as far. And then you're going to jump to the kids that are older elementary school, middle school, right? They can go on their own. So I think in order to know what play equipment that you would have, you kind of need to know what the demographics are that you're pulling from. So those are a couple comments. And then I've seen comments, and I'm not familiar with this park. I meant to go there this weekend to check it out, but I will do that at another time. But I've seen comments about the lack of sidewalks to the park. And if that is true, and you can't safely send your kid on the street, on a sidewalk to get to the park, then it seems backwards to me to do improvements that are going to attract kids without first fixing the sidewalk issue. That's just a safety concern. And I guess that's it for me. Oh, I will also just share, I grew up on a rural island. We didn't have any play equipment. We just had the woods, and you can have a fabulous time and play all day, in the woods. And, so we don't have to put in play equipment for kids to, have a great time and connect with nature. which is really something that's lacking these days anyway. So.
Can I comment on that, Danielle? Because I really appreciate that, and I something I emphasized at the February Park Board meeting that I hope this discussion, wherever we land, I think really emphasizes a new approach that we are attempting to take in play, and what play means and what play looks like, and that play doesn't need to be this plop piece of equipment or the structure. Because you're absolutely right. I think each of our parks in our city system are unique. And as we begin to think about that neighborhood's interest in play and what it looks like, play takes many shapes and forms. And you're absolutely right? What play looks like at Hillside Park should look very different than what play looks like at Central Park, for example, right? And so I hope that wherever both of these projects lands, and it's interesting, even with Hillside and Blackberry, and as we talk about Blackberry next, I think we'll see this differentiation that play is going to likely look different at each of these parks, but that doesn't mean one is less important or less intentional than the other. And so I appreciate that feedback. And again, I think Jennifer and I both really appreciate the feedback that we've received from the community. It's important to hear from those that don't want anything added to this park, just as it's important to hear those who want to see play added to this park. And our job, like I said earlier, is not to determine or think of this as a winning and a losing proposition, but this is really our job to try and seek balance. And by taking this a little more intentional way of approaching play and not being so typecast and, well, it's just got to look like another play structure, is hopefully something that's going to help in this conversation and maybe get beyond what has felt like over and over again, maybe competing interests within the same neighborhood.
See here, anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. It sounds like there's still there's work being done to reach out to neighbors there to inform them of this, but it sounds like some people are still kind of falling through. Is there any way to do an actual notice posting inside the park to help people know far enough in advance if they're not able to access technology?
Yes, absolutely, Jonathan. I think as we get closer to what that next both virtual public meeting is and on-site open house, we will not only reach out to all those who have certainly given us feedback already, but actually physically post something within the park as well. Social media has certainly been helpful as well, as that I know our communications team has been able to utilize Nextdoor for the Squawk Mountain neighborhood to get the news out there. So both, I think, a combination of feedback we've received already in the park and social media.
Great, because I think to Danielle's point, there is no parking there, and I assume it's almost exclusively folks from the neighborhood that are using that park and would see that. And so I think that may help as well, ensuring we're getting the right folks and not just opening it up to anybody to kind of comment who may not have used it before and just says, yes, I want more parks. And then on the survey results that are posted online, I might be looking at the wrong thing, but I only see like a handful of slides, and I don't see that it represents all of the data that Jennifer just shared. So possible I'm looking at the wrong thing, but
If you look,
two surveys, Jonathan. You're probably looking at the slides from the survey of the actual virtual meeting. There's if you go farther up, I think there's a tab that says online survey results.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's in the paragraphs.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yep.
And then if this pushes till 2022, is there any kind of procedural concern with money that's already earmarked for these improvements?
No, we'll be able to request a reauthorization since the project is underway.
Okay.
Pending council approval, of course.
So, Jonathan, yeah, like any project, these funds were identified for this specific project in the capital fund. So, as Jennifer said, they would be requested to be reallocated to the following year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can you guys speak a little bit to the sidewalk concern that people have and what that looks like there?
I can speak a little bit to it, Danielle, but I'm not the Public Works Department, so I'm not sure. I am aware. I know throughout the Squaw Mountain community, on Olympus Drive and others, there are not sidewalks within Squaw Mountain community and neighborhoods, and so I certainly understood and have certainly heard in my time here that concern. So there is mobility. But there is not physical sidewalks in many of the neighborhoods. So as we've certainly heard this feedback again through this process, we have certainly shared that with not only the mayor but also Public Works Department.
I also want to add that the lack of missing connections, meaning sidewalks, was also noted in the master mobility plan that was just adopted as well. And so until funded in a transportation package for future project improvements, they would likely be delayed, but they have been identified as a gap.
Are there some sidewalks just not continuous, or are there no sidewalks in that part of the neighborhood?
Mostly no sidewalks in that part of the neighborhood. It was designed that way back in, the 60s, 70s.
Can you clarify, Jennifer, entry points? I know the one there at the end of that street is kind of the main primary entry point, but there are others, aren't there?
There are. There's actually all of the streets up and down the west side up until you hit to the water tower where you're at the base of the deep cliff. Yeah, you can walk into the park from any of those streets. There's also people walk in, as previously mentioned, from the cemetery. Also, some of the trails that people have either maintained or are historic trails within, or new social trails, do connect from the power lines into different areas. But it's all, dependent upon somewhat of your skill and where you live and how you want to get to the park as to how you access it. So it is a very large park at almost 40 acres. So there's a lot of entry points. But the main one to the 2-acre open area that this project is focusing on, the main access point is probably the 3 streets on that side of the park.
Do you have a slide that you could show us that has the overhead, like an overhead view of what you're talking about?
I can try and find one. Hang on.
In the meantime, does anybody else have any comments or questions?
As far as drainage, so this is something that has come up a number of times with this park as well. Is this something that is a candidate for the kind of enhancement that we've done in front of the community center and at Tibbetts in the past?
Yeah, yes, it could be, Danielle, and that's some of the site analysis and diagnostic we need to do is first understand what's going on and what's the source and why. But then, yeah, I think once we have an understanding of what's going on there, then we can begin to work towards what solutions look like.
So, Jeff, is your budget restricted to a play area, or would some of that budget be available for repairing any drainage issues?
It would be available for that, as we shared that with the community as well. So,
Okay.
Yep. Again, in many ways, that field is a play space, right? Again, play takes many shapes and forms, and and how we could make that play field more of a year-round amenity for the neighborhood would be a real plus, it sounds like.
Yeah, and when you live in a hillside neighborhood, flat grassy spot is gold. So
Yep. But Jen found a map. Muted, Jen.
Thank you. So here's the map. The roughly 2-acre area we're exploring for play. All of the houses on the west here have fences that back up against the park. But this is the main walk-in entrance off of Mount McKinley. There's also access off of Kenya and Juniper and Hood, but Hood is a little trickier. There's a water tower over in there, and then also you can see in here where my cursor is, there's a steeper slope. But here's power line over to the north of the page, and multiple access points from there that people can walk into. Also, there's this lower section down here. There are a few trails that come up. Some through this center area are not very functional right now due to the steepness of the grade and people accessing it. So most likely your access points are going to be from over here, from the power line, as well as these 4 neighborhood streets.
Okay, well, I know we need to kind of move on to other topics, but before we do, anybody else have any more questions or comments on Hillside Park? Not seeing any, so let's move on.
Sounds good, Brad. Thanks for the discussion, everyone, and we will continue to keep you informed on both of these projects. So Blackberry Park, really quick, you may recall in 2017, this park was transferred to the city of Issaquah from King County. For years before that, the neighborhood had made improvements to this King County owned space and have really sort of created a neighborhood park of their own. In 2017, when the park was transferred to the city, we hosted a barbecue out on site and began the conversation with the neighborhood about how they use the space, what they'd like to see in the space, how they might like to see the space improved. At the time, this play equipment was identified as we did our analysis as we received the park. This is a fine play structure for a backyard, but does not meet any national safety standards when it comes to placing it in a public park. As we've communicated that with the neighborhood, thankfully there's not any immediate safety concerns, but something that we had shared with them that we knew we would need to replace and address and have play space that meets those national safety standards for publicly located play amenities. Fast forward now to the meeting we had on the 26th of February. Jen, if you want to go to the next slide. From that feedback, and as Jennifer will walk through, and as I highlighted in the introduction, what we heard and what we learned really is helping us to shape the next steps of this project that are going to look a little different than Hillside. We heard a lot of support and more than anything, varying degrees of how much play they want to have in the space, but a real strong degree of support of making these public investments into this neighborhood park that has been utilized so much by the neighbors and the residents of South Cove. So as to next steps, we really see again continued public discussion and public dialogue, but it probably taking a different pace and a different cadence. than Hillside Park. So with that, Jennifer, do you want to highlight sort of what we heard and learned that evening and with the online survey responses, and then we can talk through what next steps look like with this project. Take it away, Jen.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff. So as Jeff mentioned, at the community meeting on the 25th, we heard a lot of support, and many of the residents that were in attendance were also part of the development of the park, as that was before it came to the city, created by the surrounding neighborhood. And change is always hard when you have a personal investment in something, but it was really exciting from the community to hear that they're open to change. They recognize things have lived their useful life, and looking forward to keeping it a park where the neighborhood can gather, come together, kids can play, birthday parties can be had, and a place for all the kids to enjoy. What we heard from the online survey is we had 149 responses. 87% of the respondents lived in the South Lake Sammamish neighborhood. When asked how they would like to play, their top responses were climb, zip, swing, slide, adventure play, and perching. When asked what type of playground would fit into the neighborhood, wood or log structures were preferred, along with some mixed materials, and this somewhat resembles what's already there on site with the existing play structure. Respondents felt inclusive play was very important, also were fitness and play for the entire family. Respondents were a bit flat on their need for exploration and discovery spaces, and the importance of integrating plantings into the play area, which in accordance, there's not many plants there right now other than some blackberry patches. Site amenities of most importance that they would like to see added are picnic benches, and accessible areas. They felt art could be added to the unique play structure, as well as other nature-inspired objects such as fencing. In looking at play area layouts, a larger and an additional structure was preferred by 58% of respondents. And smaller structures or equal to what's there made up the other 42%. And so in summary, got some really good feedback to take to the consultants. That's it for the online survey.
Anything to add on this one, Jeff?
I can touch base on the other two bullets in terms of site analysis and next steps, and then open it up for discussion if you'd like.
Okay.
So in regards to site analysis, again, a different site, different canvas than Hillside. There are no known critical areas on this site, but site analysis includes understanding some of the easements, some of the setbacks, given this is a pretty tight residential area. We also have a patch of invasive Himalayan blackberry that's quite well loved for certain times of the year when it's harvested. So some of our conversations with the neighborhood as we go forward is, what do we want to do with that, right? Does it remain? Is there a way to create maybe some harvesting of berries, but in a little more controlled fashion than in more of a less of an invasive nature and an invasive way? That's allowing us to really, I think, look at next steps a little bit more in line with what was anticipated schedule-wise in terms of looking to consider completing something this fall. We anticipate the next public meeting really being an opportunity to begin to talk through the feedback we heard from the survey and start to frame up some options that the same consultant team is working on. What's interesting with this feedback and this discussion, we really anticipate it being a discussion of trade-offs with the community. So with that desire by many for a large play space, we really want to make sure the community understands and the neighborhood understands the trade-off that would exist, meaning the loss of some of that just open field area that exists and is so well loved within this park. And so we really see an opportunity to begin to explore, again, those trade-offs and really beginning to understand how scale of play is going to affect some of the different functions that this neighborhood wants to maintain and keep within that play space. So that discussion at the next meeting will really inform and begin to shape up what would be a preferred concept following that meeting. Again, a chance to, once a preferred concept is created, have another opportunity for sharing and getting feedback from the community with, again, a goal of considering design this summer and project installation starting this fall. So with that, we're available for any questions or just feedback discussion you all have. Thanks.
Questions, comments, anyone?
I think what was interesting to me in looking at these two survey results is that it seemed like both neighborhoods kind of there was a strong desire to kind of improve on what they have, but in a manner that's consistent with what's there. So I think we're going the right direction, at least for Blackberry Park.
Again, I reiterate what I was saying earlier. Play isn't universal in every park, right? What play looks like in different neighborhood parks really should take the shape and form of that neighborhood and the uniqueness of the neighborhood, as well as the park site itself.
I think there was some discussion about pickleball, and I think we've had some separate discussion about an adjacent park where that might be more suitable. Maybe want to comment on that?
Yeah, Brad, thanks for that. So that came up in the virtual meeting we had on the 25th. Forgive me, I think I said 26th. I have too many dates in my head. But yeah, there's an existing concrete pad that the neighborhood uses for pickleball there at Blackberry Park. Again, trade-offs are always interesting. There were a couple of residents in the meeting who said, boy, we'd love 2 pickleball courts at Blackberry. And yet to have another concrete pad added there would really begin to affect the small footprint of that space. We mentioned at that meeting, and we'll continue to have this discussion, is if you all recall, park board members, one of the ideas that's come out of this COVID recovery fit and fun concept is, how do we create pickleball opportunities within some of our existing court spaces? And so Merewood Park is a park that we are strongly considering, the tennis court, incorporating striping two pickleball courts that would give opportunity for pickleball to not only this neighborhood that surrounds Blackberry Park, but all of that South Cove community. So as we go back for this next discussion, being able to take that park consideration that we're doing at Merewood, and bring that back to the community and see how that meets and meshes with the pickleball goals that they might have, and how that might affect or help them in decision making for what pickleball might look like here at Blackberry. Again, a pretty constrained space and a community that probably wants to pack in a little more play right now based on the survey than what the park itself can hold.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Go ahead, Danielle.
Last month, I think I asked whether this park is in South Cove proper, like the neighborhood that is able to access the South Cove Park, the private park. Do you guys have an answer to that?
I did not look into that, Danielle. I will do so.
Okay, that'd be great. And I think Merewood is outside of that neighborhood. I'm not super familiar with all of South Cove, but I think Merewood is surrounded by a neighborhood that doesn't have technical access to the bigger park.
Yeah, I'll check into access for Blackberry.
I think some of those neighborhoods have have some private parks, in them, and some of them have tennis courts. So it is sort of an interesting idea, I think, to provide a little bit more flexibility with the use of the courts in Marewood. I'd be curious what the neighborhoods would think.
Thanks, Danielle. Anybody else? Question, comment, Blackberry? Not seeing anything. You got anything more on this, Jennifer, or is it time to move on to wayfinding?
I think we can move on if there's no other questions from the board.
Not seeing anything.
Okay. So wayfinding, it has been quite a while since we've done an update on the wayfinding project. So please forgive me. I'm going to take kind of a half step back as we begin to move forward and tell you where we're at on this project. You may recall back in 2019, we had sent out an RFQ to establish the wayfinding program for the city of Issaquah. And through a selection process, we picked KPG, which is a multidisciplinary firm that was hired to be our consultant team. But what is wayfinding? A lot of people don't know what wayfinding is, and what is being addressed as part of our wayfinding package is it's a cohesive system of directional signs that help residents, visitors, and employees do decision-making as they navigate through the city, guiding them to destinations, parks, trails, identification of city facilities, schools, and transit stations. Wayfinding can be particularly important for active modes of travel, such as walking, biking, which also can connect us to nature on our trails as we rely on these visual cues, whether as we approach a street or a path as to which way to take and where to go. Wayfinding is also a really good visual communication tool that can help provide a sense of place. After selection of our consultant team, we established a steering committee, and that steering committee is made up of several members of the community, including the Downtown Issaquah Association, Chamber of Commerce, representatives from Visit Issaquah, Department of Natural Resources, which abuts some of our public land, the Rowley Properties, Park Board, Arts Commission representatives, as well as a member of the Transportation Advisory Committee, Issaquah Food Bank, and the Issaquah Alps Trails Club. We met 4 times from December 2019 through March of 2020, and then the pandemic hit. And because of COVID, we did lose some funding for this project, and it was pretty well stalled through the rest of 2020. But the project received new budgeted funds in 2021, and we revived the project again in February of this year. Midway through the design process, we had an internal workshop where city staff was able to address issues such as maintenance and the integration of this project with other city work that is underway. At the end of 2020, the Arts Commission received a state grant to come up with signage for the Creative Arts District, and they hired an artist to assist them with that project. And knowing where we were in our design process, we partnered with them to help get an artist's view on the city signage to help reflect a more vibrant sign design that really spoke to Issaquah. And so in your packet presentation, I'm going to quick run through kind of where we are. This is the most recent package that was shared with the steering committee. And you can see the work that they have been doing to date. So we have been working on finding gateway vehicular location signs for the city, monument signs at all of our different entrances. We've been looking at gateway, boat, bicycle, and pedestrian sign location maps for some of our major routes, and identifying these major routes and where some sign locations are really critical for decision-making points. We've also been looking at more of our pedestrian facilities, directional signage, and different location maps, as well as where regional attractions are, city trailhead and parking sign location maps, park sign location maps, as well as city facility sign location maps. Through the work with the artist and the steering committee, we have been able to come up with 4 different concepts that each uniquely represent Issaquah. And after our last steering committee meeting, they gave us the okay after looking at these concepts to move forward with our public engagement process. I'll first walk through some of the different sign concepts. And to let you know, these are not the updated graphics. Like this sign concept, for instance, concept 1 has a nice green background. We have, after the steering committee meeting, we are no longer using a crane symbol, but we'll sub this out for a salmon instead. So that is the only modification on this one. But you can see the different suite of sign designs that would be going forward. We've got monument signs, both horizontal, which might be placed in a roundabout, vertical, of large and a small one. We've also got vehicular signs, directional signs, pedestrian size signs. We've got trailhead signage, park signage, and some city facility signage. Sign concept 2 kind of reflects this view of Mount Rainier between Squak and Tiger Mountains. And steering committee really had a lot of thought around this design concept. One thing we have to take into mind as we look at these concepts, they're very flat because they're on paper right now. But as we talk through these design concepts, we've also thought about how they'll be lit as monument signage or on facility signage. So that also plays into the depth or the creativity of each of these different sign concepts. The third sign concept kind of talks about the quiet mountainscape that we have and the trees with Issaquah. And sign concept 4 is more of Issaquah Creek running into the mouth of Lake Sammamish with some topography and different blue colors. Now, all of these different concepts, as we take them out to the community, we know not either one of these are going to be the final product. We know it is likely going to be a blend of pieces and parts from all the different sign concepts. And we'll be asking the community. But we did do some photo simulations so you can get an idea of what some of these might look like in the various locations. Here's a roundabout monument signage as well as some vertical signage, both on a regional trail system as well as a vertical gateway. Here's some directional signage. Some park and facility signage as well as trail signage. And again, for concept 2, same different simulated images. In concept 3, and concept 4. And that's it. So given the direction from the steering committee, We, as I mentioned, are working with our consultant team on putting together a public engagement plan. We are going to be doing some online surveys as well as have some physical signs out and about located in various places throughout the community that we might be able to have QR codes that people could scan and take a survey right then and there and gain feedback in many different ways. We'll likely have a longer engagement period for this. We're also trying to figure out how to reach some other languages as part of this outreach process as well. So a lot more to come, but it is our goal by the end of this year to have all of this information, a final sign concept that will get shared with the community. Like I said, it's likely a mix of the different concepts shown. And then we'll put that into a master plan by the end of the year that will have a phased implementation plan. We don't know what that phased implementation plan will look like. However, we'll want to make sure that it's consistent routes, facility signage, and a mix of things. So I think there's still some further work we need to do on that, but we anticipate that being done by the end of this year. And then implementation would start to follow in following calendar years. So with that, I'll take any questions.
So I have a couple, Jen. Are there any more access points that still need to be done, or has that all been established at this stage?
It's pretty well established at this stage.
So for the most part, we're just really kind of talking about design and colors is really kind of what the main part of public outreach is going to be about?
Correct.
And then once approved, what's the forecast in terms of implementation? Is this going to be basically just presenting new signage on places that probably don't have any right now? Is that going to be the priority, or is the priority going to be replacement of what is existing?
That's a great question, Brad. Like I said, we don't really know what our criterion for implementation is going to be. I think there's still a lot of discussion as far as what the mayor's priorities would be on that, as well as what projects would be underway, where it would make sense, routes, entrances. I think there's a lot of conversation that still needs to be had about what that prioritization is, but I would see, and it's all dependent upon how much money we want to invest annually as to how long it would take to implement all of these. Obviously, we do have some parks like Confluence that has a newer sign, probably be at the bottom of the list for replacement. However, we do have many signs that are in dire need of a paint job or a replacement, and even some of our facility signs are very outdated. We have quite the mix out when you look at what our existing inventory is, and so trying to determine where to start is going to be a big point of conversation until we're able to phase this project. So more to come on that.
Jennifer, if I could just add real quickly, Brad, great question. This is going to be a multi-year effort, multi-year effort, right? So I think, as Jennifer said, I think as we get an idea of what the design concept begins to look like and begin to have that public dialogue with council, with community as to what implementation looks like, I think we're quite confident, like many cities, this is going to take many years to begin to prioritize what installation looks like, whether it's replacement of old signs or identified priorities such as wayfinding a priority, or is entry signs the priority. That's all to be determined, but this is not thought to be a 2-year effort to totally switch out signs. This could be, again, a number of years, 5, 6, 7-year effort.
And just to add to that, I just want to say we're also looking at doing sign cleanup as part of this new installation to help with some of the sign clutter that is out on some of our streets. So just to bring that to everyone's attention.
I noticed today that the city posted a meeting for PPC to be doing some work about commercial signage. And is that going to have any impact or influence on this wayfinding project?
Yeah, so what you're mentioning, Brad, is I think there's updates taking place with the sign code.
Right.
Yeah, so Jennifer and I have had conversations with planning department about that in this effort, and yeah, making sure those two actions speak to one another, right? This wayfinding and park facility sign design effort is really about public signage, not about commercial, private, corporate signage at all.
Ruben, you got something?
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys have given any thought to letting any community organizations sponsor a sign?
Great question, Ruben. I think as we begin to get into what implementation looks like, that could be something that that we look at and consider what those options look like.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd love to, in kind of to just put something else out there. Think, and I've mentioned this a few times over the years, but I think our parks, the names of our parks are not always helpful in figuring out what's there. So we sort of like for a bunch of years, we're naming parks just, you know, whatever it is, park. That park might not have any amenities in it, right? It might just be a natural area. Whereas some of our parks have, you know, are more like Tibbetts is almost like an athletic complex. It's serving like an athletic complex right now, and the Highlands as well. And so it might be a worthwhile exercise to kind of go through our list and see if there are names that we might, if there might be a naming convention that would be more useful. And to do that ahead of, you know, ahead of getting any other signs up.
That's a great point. I think one example would be Inge Johnson Park, right? Though named a park, it really is functioning as flood control, stormwater capacity, and a wonderful open space natural area.
Yep. So could you call that, you know, natural space or natural area or something else like that,
Right.
so somebody who's not familiar with the area isn't following a sign, you know, to go there thinking that there might be restrooms, for example.
Right. So yeah, those naming conventions, we would want to have that discussion before investing in a sign such
That would
as
be
this.
a good
Yep.
exercise for this year.
Yep.
Yeah, and as a reminder, we do have the statute for a park naming committee. So it would likely be an ad hoc committee of the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it might be worth looking at those. I know we have like parameters for, you know, how we name parks, and so it might even be that the criteria itself might need to be tweaked or revised a little bit.
I agree that we need to do that, Danielle, and I think it would go hand in hand with, you know, a park naming committee, because we do need to, you know, address some of those issues as well, and seems to make sense to do them together if possible. Given that this is such a long tail project, though, I'm not seeing any real urgency for not necessarily any of that. It might be kind of good to actually get some of the design stuff done, you know, now, so that we know what we're working with, you know, and can revise it. I like April's comment about temporary names that could actually be changed easily. Is that something that's come up with the consultants as an option?
No, it's not something that we've talked about. However, what has been talked about is each of these signs being of durability, that if they should get damaged through vandalism, that they're readily replaceable through fabrication. So we'll have to see what that would be, but temporary signs will have to, or letters to be able to change out, we'll have to check into that.
Brad, I agree that there's no urgency, on this, but I also think, there are times that are naturally like super busy for us as a board and for staff, and there are other times where, it's not quite as busy. And so, to the extent that if we're at a point where we're at a lull compared to, some times that we've had in the last few years, it would be good to just sneak it in.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to add that, Danielle. That's a great point. I think, Brad, as you as the park board chair, right, as we're looking at agenda building and projecting out, I think we can try and identify when is that right time to maybe have that naming convention conversation as this work continues.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments about wayfinding?
I just have a quick closing comment to that. Again, Jennifer, thanks for the update. That presentation certainly represents a lot of work, and wayfinding is many more things than just a fancy looking sign at the entrance to a park or the city. And so I really appreciate the work that multiple departments have done, that Jennifer's been leading. The steering committee work of the community has been very helpful. I think at the end of the day, the goal of this effort is really to take our trails and our parks and help them function better, right? Connectivity becomes that much more useful when there's a really intuitive wayfinding program, whether it's for bikers or for pedestrians. So I think the goal of this effort is more than just a fancy sign. It's really functionality, and it's those functional goals that have really been a priority for this community for a long time. So we're excited late April, early May to launch into this degree of public engagement for this effort. As Jennifer mentioned, we really want to do a mix of online, but also on trail, if you will. Though we can't host giant public meetings, we think it would be great to have some of these concepts out on a couple of our trails and really invite the community to go look at them and see them and be able to respond to the survey as they're physically looking at these boards and signs, and just trying to find creative ways in this COVID recovery phase that we're in really engaging with the community in different ways about this work. So thank you for the discussion and the feedback, and thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I agree. The priority would be, to me anyway, how to find places and where to find parking and that kind of stuff. And quite frankly, that probably would be less expensive, because that's, the big cost is going to be the main signs, at the entry points and stuff. That's where a lot of the cost is going to be, where these signs that point out direction here and there probably wouldn't be as expensive and could be done much sooner. So anything else on that? Don't see any hands up. Oh, Danielle?
No, I just want to say, I'm super excited for this to get rolled out. I know it's a long-term project, but when especially if you're a visitor to an area, it's so nice when it's easy to figure out where you're going. So thank you for your work on this.
Okay, we'll conclude that. And on to reports. And I guess that's me. First up, don't have much. I'll just say Current terms run through April, and new terms will start in May. We do have a few people that are up for new terms, and we've already completed most of the interviews. We have one more interview yet to complete, probably sometime this week. And then Jeff will send off some recommendations to the mayor by the end of the month, and we should have final results in April. Probably before our next meeting, I would think. And the only other thing I have is called the Public Lands Forum, which is being sponsored this year by the Issaquah Alps Trails Club, as well as Mountain of Sound Greenway as well. And I sent the registration out to everybody some time ago. The meeting is coming up this Thursday, March 25th at 6:30 p.m. It's a virtual meeting. You do have to register for it. If anybody would still like to go that hasn't registered and don't still have a copy of what I sent out, please let me know, and I'll send you another link to register for that. It's going to be a good one this year since we have a guest speaker of Sally Jewell, which is the prior CEO of REI and was also the U.S. Secretary of Interior under the Obama administration. So she's a real powerhouse here, lives in our community. Well, not necessarily in Issaquah, but at least in Puget Sound. So I'm sure she'll have a lot of good things to have to talk about. So I encourage people to try and join us for that if possible. So like I said, if you still need the link to registration, please let me know and I'll send that off to you by email. Ruben, you got something? Ruben?
Oh, then just, yeah, send me the link. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'll get that to you, Ruben. That's all I had for chair report. So I guess, Jeff, you're up for director's report.
Sounds good, Brad. Thank you. Yeah, that Public Lands Forum this Thursday is going to be a great one, as Brad said. I just want to add one more. There's one more sponsor to that event, and it's the City of Issaquah, along with Alps Trails Club and Mountains of Sound Greenway. So 300 plus attendees have already signed up for that. So should be a great evening. And you're right, Sally Jewell is a inspirational speaker, certainly. A couple items I have. One is just a quick project update on Central Park Pad 3, the turf replacement. Thank you again for the discussion we had earlier this year about options and how we want to approach that project. Your input really helped to shape that. Wanted to let you know a contract has been awarded with field turf. We will be proceeding with that project. We're going to be utilizing the mix of cork and sand as the infill for that project. That will be starting June 7th. The goal is to be completed by time for youth football to start, as well as fall soccer there in August. So more to come. We've been getting news out to sports groups as well as Highlands community, and look forward to that project getting underway in June. Another update I have really quickly is on Green Issaquah, our ongoing operational partnership with Forterra. A couple things going on there. If you recall, we initiated some recruitment and training efforts for forest stewards. That work continues. We have another training and recruitment later this month and one in April. As we begin to line up stewards. Certainly a lot of interest that's happening in the community as COVID recovery and Healthy Washington plans begin to enter future phases. We're optimistic that there'll be opportunities to begin to initiate some volunteer efforts in that work in the coming months. We also, as part of that work, have been putting together and working with Forterra on an actual implementation guide as to what that looks like. If you recall, part of Green Issaquah was a forest assessment that we did of all of our urban forest acres, city-owned urban forest acres. The implementation guide really takes a look at, if you remember, the triage analysis that was done with each acre to identify the health of our forest in relation to invasives and other key factors of the forest that are really going to help us to prioritize our invasive removal and restoration efforts. So that guide should be coming our way here in April. I'm hoping either by our April meeting or our May meeting, be able to share that document with you. Also, just looking backwards as to last year, I wanted to highlight that as we're getting more intentional with our tree succession plantings, understanding the urban forest is a living, breathing entity. The city's always been committed to tree plantings. Last year, we heightened that effort. We planted 10,000 trees within our urban forest, and certainly an exciting effort, and not something we did alone. We did with a number of partners, Washington Conservation Corps, as well as Mountain Sound Greenway. Matt Meckler and Jen Fink certainly deserve a lot of rounds of applause for that effort. We also were able to complete that volume of trees through a grant we received through King County. You may be familiar with a countywide grant effort that they had underway to try and plant 1 million trees. Well, we took it upon ourselves to get 10,000 of those planted just within our city-owned properties here in Issaquah. Exciting accomplishment, and again, hopefully one that we begin to model as we move forward with Green Issaquah, and again, understanding the ongoing stewardship effort that's needed to stewarding and managing our urban forest. The last item I have is more of a heads up. Hopefully more coming, definitely more coming in April. This is a year, every other year, the city updates its 6-year capital improvement plan, its 6-year CIP. This is an update year, and so the capital improvement plan includes really all of our various pieces of public infrastructure, whether that's our utilities, our storm, water utilities, transportation and road capital infrastructure, as well as facilities and parks and trails. So Jennifer and I are working with finance and administration right now on what that update looks like. I'd like to, in April, be able to bring that back to you and share with you what that update looks like. You may recall, as we adopted the 2018 Park Strategic Plan, that would become the anchor document that would inform our capital improvement plan, and that is the very thing that's happening with this update as well. Taking really the near-term priority projects that were identified in the Park Strategic Plan, aligning that with available funding or anticipated funding coming from finance, really being able to lay out a capital improvement plan that tries to show what we can afford in the coming 6 years with anticipated revenues. The 6-year CIP is not a budget document. It really is a financial planning document that lets the city begin to look and see how far its revenues can go relative to the community needs and interests of all of these varying degrees of infrastructure, whether it's parks, trails, roads, facilities, etc. So more to come as that begins to take shape and gets into a form that I can share with all of you. That's it. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Jeff. And looks like Ryan got a few words for us, do you?
I do. Thank you, Brad. So I guess I'll just kind of go over what we did at our last 2 meetings. We've had 2 meetings since the last park board meeting. The first one was just a work group meeting. We have a lot of events coming up in April, including a food drive. We have a few different conferences. That's sort of, a lot of groups have been focusing on conferencing just because that's we viewed it as the best way to sort of do things through Zoom and virtually. So we have one on racism, civic engagement, and then State of Mind, which is our mental health conference that we try and do each year. And then last week we had another meeting with the Puget Sound Regional Council and Mayor Pauley, and we did a lot of brainstorming about what the future of transportation looks like, sort of what where youth are sort of interested in going in Issaquah today, and also looking towards sort of what we value in transportation in the future, what is going to be important to think about as the population and landscape change 50 years from now. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan, for that. But a lot of great things going on with the youth here in our community. Appreciate that. Jeff, you got anything from the mayor for the mayor's report?
No specific updates other than, again, a big thanks for the work you did with the work we did with Central Park in terms of having that discussion on what kind of product we want to proceed with, and that really helped shape that contract.
Okay. Anybody have any announcements or other business to discuss?
Have you guys, I saw that REI is going to be moving into one of the, they've kind of broken up their headquarters and will be moving into Issaquah. And that seems like a natural kind of partner or collaborator with us. So I'm just wondering if you guys have had any contact with them or if there's a opportunity to do that.
There's been a welcome to the neighborhood, but we want to let the new neighbors have a chance to move in before we have too many discussions or conversations about ways to partner. Yeah, it is. It's terrific news. Terrific news for Issaquah. I in my previous job in Kent, coincidentally, which was the headquarters of REI before, they were amazing partners, and I know we'll certainly look forward to likely partnering with many of the amazing agencies here in Issaquah. But I think the goal is to really give them an opportunity to focus on moving in. They're really looking at a new office model. So a lot of work for them to figure out what that looks like before we as a community come knocking on their door. So more to come.
Yeah, I think this is going to be their first satellite office, so I'm sure they'll be investing a lot of thought into how that rolls out. Almost kind of like their flagship of the satellite office concept. So
I think it's super exciting for Issaquah. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Probably super exciting for Raleigh too, to actually have their new building already have a tenant. You know.
Sure.
Any other announcements, comments?
Brad, I have one item of personal privilege, super duper fast.
Sure.
My youngest girl, Anna, turned 16 today. So happy birthday,
Anna. All right.
Yeah, way to go. As any 16-year-old, she would be super embarrassed if she was listening right now. But
she'd even be more embarrassed if you started posting pictures or a video of her birthday cake.
We won't go there.
It's probably safe
She has to put up with a parks director who sometimes has to do evening meetings for birthdays and whatnot. So way to go, Anna.
Well, you only got 2 more years before she's off to college, so it's a good time to take advantage of all that.
And go Zags.
Yeah, I would
My
think.
son's a freshman there, so.
Okay, everyone. Well, thanks so much for showing up tonight, and appreciate all your input. And we'll do it again next month. So take care of yourselves. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.